Hey everybody, just a quick recap. In part one, I walked you guys through how I design the registration marks in the CorelDRAW software. We cut out the masks, I showed you how I weed them out, get them ready to be applied. We applied the first mask and we went ahead and sprayed the silver. In part two, we're going to finish this panel out. So it's been about an hour, and I'm sure some of you are probably wondering, hey Trevor, why wait an hour? I'm glad you asked. That's a great question. The reason behind the hour wait comes down to Createx paint or water-based paint in general takes longer to cure. Now, this is not cured after an hour. It usually takes, depending on your conditions, where you're at, it's going to take 24 to maybe 48 hours for this paint to actually be cure and fully hardened. Water-based paint is relatively soft immediately after you spray it, which can be very advantageous when we're doing actual artworks and we're trying to manipulate the paint. When you're working with masking techniques, that is not advantageous at all. If you don't allow the paint to harden up some before you go to peel all this vinyl off using either a fingernail or an X-Acto knife, there's a pretty good chance you're going to scrape away some of the paint that you just put down, and you'll either have to touch it up or repair it in some manner. So that's why I chose to wait an hour. That's also why I chose to use the 40-30 Balancing Clear, because this allows the finish to dry to a much more durable finish than without it. So under normal circumstances, if I was just painting this tag with a general artwork of some kind without any masking, I wouldn't have worried about using the 40-30 in my paint. Because I'm using masking techniques, that's the main reason why I chose to add the 40-30 to the paint. So at this point, like I mentioned before, I thought I was being smart, and I thought I was going to be able to just lay this mask directly over the existing mask and then paint the black and then pull all the vinyl off and we're done. But again, I think it's going to be too thin, and I'm afraid that the vinyl won't actually make contact with the tag blank. So what I'm going to do is peel off the mask here, and then we will apply this, with the exception of the airbrush lettering. The airbrush lettering is exactly the same on both of these. There's really no reason to peel all this up and then just apply it again. So what I'll do, I should, if I'd have thought about this while I was actually designing the masks, I should have just omitted the airbrush from the second mask, but I didn't think to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my X-Acto knife, I'm going to cut around the airbrush lettering. And just remove it from the mask just like that. So now I will remove everything except for the airbrush lettering, and then we'll move on. Now hopefully you can really see the contrast between the silver and the white. It's hard to see the silver on camera with the studio lights and the glare that's created from the metallic in the silver. said I would be removing all of this except for the airbrush lettering, and that's not quite accurate either. Don't remove your registration marks if you still have to apply another mask. So our registration marks on all four corners will remain. When I look at this from a side cast view, I can see a few little nicks in the silver from my fingernail. Realistically, an hour probably wasn't quite long enough to allow this to sit. And to be very honest with you guys, if I were doing this for a client, I would more than likely allow this to sit overnight before I actually did anything else to it. This is just for this video. I wasn't that concerned about it, and as thin as this silver outline is going to be, I don't think anybody would ever see it anyway. One other thing that I would normally do, anytime I'm working with a metallic or a pearlescent, I would normally come in and put a clear coat over this. Whether you want to use just a transparent base, you can use the 40-30, just something to protect either the metallic or the pearlescent, whichever you're using. Because the problem with metallics and the pearlescents is those little tiny metallic or pearlescent particles are very easy to pull up with masking tape or vinyl when you mask over the top of it. So just a quick 1 or 2 coats of, again, a transparent base or the 40-30 protects your metallic or your pearlescent, and it keeps everything there, so you don't have to worry about pulling anything up. Again, this is just a tag specifically for this video. I'm not that concerned about it, so I have not done that. So next we need to go ahead and apply our second mask. Now, some of you may have noticed earlier that although we used the transparent transfer tape so that we can see, we still have backing paper behind our registration marks. Here's the trick to that. I flip it over and I cut out the backing paper behind the registration marks. Now, it's a little bit difficult to see exactly where your registration marks are when you flip this over. An easy trick is to hold this up to either a window, light box, or just to a light. I can do it right here. I'm going to take a Sharpie and just draw a little X where all of these registration marks are. Good enough. Put the Sharpie away, grab our X-Acto knife. And I'm just going to cut a square and this takes a little bit of practice because I'm cutting through the backing sheet only. I'm not cutting all the way through to the vinyl. And then I can peel that away. And bam! Now we can see our registration mark. So I'll do the same thing for the other 3 registration marks. It's a good idea to use a fresh blade when you're doing this so that you don't cut too deep and go all the way through the vinyl. Just like that, now we can actually see through our registration marks. So the application process is the same as it was before. However, this time I'm going to take a piece of tape and have it free and ready before I actually get our vinyl mask lined up. Cutting away the backing sheet around your registration marks does 2 things though. Not only can I see through those registration marks in order to line this up now, but I also have a little bit of sticky, so that actually helps hold it in place. So I'm just going to line these up. Remember, these are computer cut plus signs, so they should line up almost perfectly. It's usually difficult to get them to line up 100% because the rest of the sheet is going to move some. But if you take your time, you can get really, really close. And that looks really good. So I'll do the same thing as I did before. I'll put a piece of masking tape relatively close to the center. It doesn't have to be exact. Burnish that down, and then we can pull up one end. Same process. I'm going to remove the backing sheet from half of this. Whoops, missed part of the A. So I'll just burnish that down, and we'll try to peel it back again. That time it stayed. And then once I get all the way to the tape, I'll tear this off. And then I can start to apply it. Remove the tape. Whoops. That was not part of the plan. Luckily, I think this will still work. If I hadn't cut the airbrush out of this mask, that would not have happened. Obviously, I cut a little deeper than I should have and got into the backing sheet. But we'll make it work. That looks pretty good. And you guys saw some of the issues I had removing the transfer tape from the very first mask. because I burnished it down with just my hands, my fingers. This time I'm going to try using a squeegee. Hopefully we don't have anything trying to peel up with the transfer tape this time. This is the same process as when you're actually applying the transfer tape to the vinyl. You just want to give good pressure and make sure you burnish all the areas. Once again, I'll pull up from one end of the transfer tape. Now you can see the negative portion of our registration mark is coming up. I'm okay with that because this is the last mask that we're applying for this particular panel. If I had more masks to apply, I still want to keep my positive, but I'm going to wind up removing the negatives anyway because I have to put another mask down. You see that one stayed behind. As well as that one. And the third one will probably remain behind as well. So, all I would do is just like removing the vinyl, is just peel up the negative portions of the vinyl. And we're ready to line up an additional mask. Now, again, this is the last mask that we're going to be using for this particular panel, so I'm going to go ahead and remove our positives as well, because all of this is going to get sprayed black. And we're ready to mix up some paint. Okay, I went ahead and mixed up some Wicked Detail Black off camera. I did it off camera because it's exactly the same as what I showed you guys when we mixed up the AutoAir Metallic Silver, including using some 40/30 in the mixture simply because we are going to have to remove the vinyl again. So let's get to spraying the black. See how I'm using very light coats. You don't want to hammer water-based paint onto the surface. Don't forget to use just air from the brush to dry the paint every now and then. Again, remember to spray from different angles. can get your coats a little bit heavier as you get some coverage built up on your project, but you still don't want to hammer it on. And I'm still drying between coats with just air. I think that looks good. I'm going to give this 3 to maybe 4 hours to dry, just because I don't want to have to worry about touching up the black once we begin removing this vinyl. So I will be back soon. All right, this has had a few hours to dry. I think we're good to go ahead and remove the vinyl. A good test before you actually begin removing your vinyl is to pick an inconspicuous place somewhere away from your actual vinyl and scratch at it with your fingernail a little bit. If you start to pull up paint, it's a lot easier to touch up an area that's, you know, an inch or two away from the vinyl versus if you pull up some paint or scratch it right next to where the white or the silver is. That's a little more difficult to repair. So there's a good tip. I'm going to go ahead and start pulling this vinyl up. You can get a little bit of paint that builds up on the edge of the vinyl, and when you remove the vinyl, you might have a small overhang. Usually if you just take your hand and kind of rub it over the surface, it will knock any of those loose. If we take a closer look at this, you'll see that there are a couple little areas where I have some issues. There's a little bit of a bleed spot where the vinyl actually ripped on that last application right there in the corner of the banner. There's a little bit of black line right in the S, and there's a little bit of bleed in the D right there. These are relatively easy to fix. With an X-Acto blade, I'm going to come in and very carefully just scrape that away. And I mean very carefully. You're just trying to scratch the very surface. I don't want to scratch off anything more than the black blemish. Just like the previous airbrushing a logo video I uploaded on this channel, the same applies for why I decided to start with a white base coat versus a black base coat. In both of these, the end result was a black background. Again, I'm worried about paint buildup. One of my biggest pet peeves is once this has been clear coated, I do not want to be able to run my fingers or my hand over any of this graphic and be able to feel any paint edges. Anytime you're spraying paint up against a masked edge, whether it's masking tape or vinyl, you're building paint layers against that masked edge. Just like the vinyl is sitting on top of the actual panel and creating a little bit of a step, you're doing the same thing when you paint next to that vinyl. And once that vinyl is removed, now the white is back to the base level of the panel, but the black and the silver are slightly elevated, and it's not by much, but I can feel a little bit of an edge when I run my fingers over it right now. It's very minimal. It's very easy to bury under clear coat, and I can do it with probably 3 coats of clear and 1 quick sanding session before I buff and polish it. If I had done the opposite, if I started with a black background with water-based paints, it requires numerous coats to cover at full saturation using a white or a silver over a black. I would have had big time paint edges if I had done the reverse of what I actually did. That can still be buried under clear coat, but it's going to require more than 1 clear coat session, and you're going to have to sand in between those sessions to level things out. So it's more time, more work, and it costs you more money because it requires more product when it comes to clear coat. That's pretty much it in a nutshell. That is, you guys have seen pretty much from start to finish how I did this particular panel using 2 different vinyl masks, and the same applies. If you have multiple vinyl masks, I do the exact same thing. I chose a simpler design that only required 2 masks because I thought this would be a shorter video. In the end, as is often the case with my channel, this turned out to be a lot more information and a lot longer time frame than I ever anticipated when I set out to actually make this video. But I think that's good because you guys got to see pretty much the entire process from start to finish. About the only thing that I didn't share with you is how I actually create the artwork on the computer for the vinyl masks. Other than that, you saw the entire process. That's what goes into it, and I think that's better on your end because you get to see all of it rather than just bits and pieces in between. So I hope you guys got something out of this. If you did, remember to like, subscribe, and share. I will leave links in the description below to all of the products that I used throughout this video, including the CorelDRAW software that I use, the actual vinyl that I use. It's available at Coast Airbrush, and the plotter that I use. I realize that not everybody can afford a vinyl cutter or a plotter. Even the ones at a hobbyist price point are still relatively expensive, but I'm telling you guys, you cannot recreate this logo, this graphic at this scale as fast and as clean without the use of a plotter. It can be done, but it's going to take a lot longer time frame to do it, and you're going to have a lot of touch-up and repairs along the way. A plotter just makes things so much easier, so much faster, and it will pay for itself in a relatively short period of time. So I will also leave a link in the description below to the Wicked Art Teespring store where you can purchase merchandise. You can actually purchase this exact logo on some of the merchandise. It's just another way to support the channel. If you guys are finding value in the information that I'm offering, it's a great way to support the channel, and you get something out of the deal too. I think that pretty much wraps this one up. So until next time, I'm Trevor with Wicked Art Studio, and I'll see you guys then.